So I want to buy a house, but my credit is not great. Joe, what am I going to do?
Well, one thing you can look into is FHA financing. So with FHA financing, generally with conventional financing, you have a minimum credit score of 620. With FHA, you can go down to as low as 580. So definitely have some room there. Big benefit also of FHA is that 3.5% down payment.
3.5%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that seems doable. What is 3.5% if I'm looking at a $200,000?
So on a $200,000, 3.5% would be $7,000.
Oh, wait, Joe, stop. I don't have $7,000.
Well, we can definitely also look into down payment assistance programs. There's grants specific to areas that you want to buy in Northern Kentucky, specifically Covington. I know there's all sorts of opportunity for grants in Covington, but I don't want to get too far away from FHA because there are a bit more details on that. The great benefit is
possible.
It is definitely possible. The big benefit, as we were talking about, is that 3.5% down, and you can have a 580 credit score. Now, one thing that you need to take into consideration with FHA financing is that the property will be subject to a government appraisal.
So what does that mean?
It's a bit more strict than standard appraisal. Basically, there's a list of things that I'll be able to send you, but the house has to pass this government appraisal in order to be eligible for FHA financing. One of the biggest things on the FHA financing, on the government appraisal, is that the house can't have peeling paint.
Peeling paint. Why is that important?
Well, realistically, the government wants to make sure that the asset that they're helping fund is in tip-top shape. So the peeling paint, in my mind, is about as strict as it gets. It's almost a little ridiculous. And the nice thing about peeling paint is you can have the previous owners kind of touch that up a little bit before this government appraisal. There's other things on that list. Windows are a big deal. Handrails, yeah, absolutely. Can't have any work that started and is not finished.
So if the seller started to put in the bathroom in the basement,
yes,
the whole bathroom has to be done.
Yes. Speaking of basements, one thing that recently got in the way for one of the properties I was trying to lend on was loose wiring in the basement. A lot of times you see these unfinished basements. The loose wiring was what caused the appraisal.
Loose, like wires are live hanging all over, or the wires are just hanging down and they're not secured nicely and neatly?
They were secured nicely, but there wasn't drywall over them. It was, you can see the wire. If you can see the wires, we might want to look into conventional, or we can do it on the property if FHA is the only option you want to do.
Very interesting.
The fact of the matter is, guys, there's options.
There are options. There are options. So we've got conventional loans, we've got FHA loans, we've got USDA loans, we've got VA loans. There are lots of other loans as well.
Oh yeah.
But FHA is a very good loan product, especially for lower credit buyers. You can afford the payment, right? I'm paying $100 a month in rent. Okay, you can afford the payment.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Please call us right away. We can help you with this. But again, credit maybe isn't that good. Whatever the situation is, maybe you don't have a ton of money to put down. Sure. FHA is a great product. I know I've sold, I think it's over 120 now, homes to buyers using FHA loans. It's a really great product. But again, it does take a little bit more of a discerning eye.
It does. It does. And it narrows your options a little bit. Most houses, I think, would pass, but you've got to be aware of these things if we're going to start looking at homes. So.
A lot of them will. And here's what I have happen a lot of times is somebody comes in, they've got an FHA loan, and the problem comes in that they want to go and they want to look at, the cheaper homes, which I totally get. But a lot of them in our market right now, the cheaper homes are the homes that they're needing work, they're needing update. With any of these loans, the house needs to be livable.
Yes.
But that standard is a little bit higher with FH because you're putting less money down, because it is a government-backed loan. And so we have to look at these things peeling paint. And I know, Joe, you said it seems kind of silly, and it really can be sometimes. I mean, I've seen an FHA appraisal get denied because there was peeling paint. Like, you can't even get to the attic, but it's that, that attic entrance over a house, and there's some peeling paint there. And it was a little bit. They're like, nope, somebody's got to get up there and scrape it and paint it.
Right.
But part of the reason that this is important is because a lot of these older homes, too, built before 1978, have lead-based paint that were used.
Yes.
And lead-based paint, of course, is not safe for people in the sense that if you ingest it, if you do something like, apply it as a facial, take a bath in it, lead-based paint can be poisonous.
It can, yeah. Well, I mean, it's widely known now that we don't use lead-based paint for that reason.
Yeah, and so we're looking at the lead-based paint example and the peeling paint example from a safety standpoint, specifically with kids. So I always tell my clients, especially if you have children or you have pets, this is something that we do want to pay attention to, because if they pick up a paint chip and ingest it, that could be harmful.
Right.
So we want that taken care of. The other big thing is handrails. And this is common sense to me, but I am amazed at how many homes you have basements, you have upstairs, and there's no freaking handrails.
I know. It's frequent. I've been in situations where the seller installed 2x4 handrails so that we know it could pass this government appraisal.
Absolutely. And when it comes to passing, there's a difference between the function of the handrail and the fact that it's there in many cases. Right. So, I mean, it does have to be usable, but you're exactly right. I've had many situations where we went in and here's a block of wood, and we screwed that 2x4 in so it would pass the appraisal. And because it was a narrow stairwell, or they didn't like the look of it, the buyers took it right off as soon as they closed, but it was there so it could pass. But it really is a safety issue.
It is a safety issue, yes.
And folks, it's not a bad idea if you've got 8 steps, especially in some of these older areas, Dayton, Bellevue, Newport, Covington, Ludlow, where you have really narrow stairways, to have a handrail.
Absolutely it is.
I mean, this is not something that is unreasonable to ask for.
No, it's not. It's also not a bad idea to, after you talk with me and get set up with FHA financing, to be dealing with a professional who knows what to look for.
Yeah.
And so that you don't get to the government appraisal and not pass. Because these things do, so before we close, you'll have to pay for a government appraisal, inspection, earnest money, right? What you try to avoid is spending money on things and then not passing. Right. Because then you have to pay for them to go back out after it's fixed. Or if it is something that can't be fixed, then you're still out that money.
Right. Which unfortunately does happen.
It does. It's part of what makes this, it's part of the reason that you need to be dealing with professionals like Devin and myself.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, is that having done this now for several years and shown so many houses and closed so many of these deals, I would say 8 times out of 10, I can look at the property online,
right,
and tell you if it's going to have a good chance of passing FHA before we even go see it. Now, sometimes I can't, because sometimes you can't tell that there's no handrails because they don't show the stairwells, right? Sometimes you can't tell that there's peeling paint because it's in the basement and they don't show the pictures of the basement.
It's the job of the photographer to make the property look as great as it can.
Right.
Right. So you get those every now and again.
But if it's an older home, if it's something that obviously needs some updating, many times I can look at that property, I can look at the description, I can look at the details, and I can tell you, hey, this may have a problem going FHA, or sometimes I can look at it and say it's not going to go FHA. Here's why. So if the house is as is, if it's in a state and the seller isn't going to make any repairs or updates, things like that, then we know that's not even worth us taking the time to go and see. Or let me make a call before we drive out there and ask the listing agent, if they already know if it'll go FHA or if they're willing to make FHA required repairs. Because again, sometimes like a handrail is not a big deal, but if they won't do it, then that means I'm out there putting up a handrail or the buyer's putting up a handrail.
Yep, absolutely.
And honestly, that's not a great idea from a liability standpoint as well. Not that it's impossible.
Not that it's impossible.
And I can tell you, I've had some people where we've done some work. I had one lady, God bless her, she's one of my biggest fans. She'll probably watch and share this video. She wanted to buy a house. She was approved under $50,000 FHA.
Wow, really?
Joe was like, what? It took us 7 lenders.
Yeah.
Took us 7 lenders, but we finally got one. And this house, cute, it passed everything except there was peeling paint in the basement, Joe.
Yep.
Peeling paint in the basement. The seller did not live in the area. The house had been a rental. The seller said, I am not paying to do anything. I'm already selling this for $47,000. And he was giving her $2,500 closing costs on top of it.
Right.
He said, I'm not doing anything. So you know what? I spent $200 on paint and supplies, and she went out there and scraped and painted that basement.
Yeah.
And the appraiser went back out, looked around. She still lives in that house. She loves that house. She is just an awesome lady. So it is doable. And in situations like that, where we knew we're ready to close, it's just that's holding us up, we can find solutions.
Absolutely. It's identifying the problem.
Yeah.
Identify the problem and then look for solutions.
So again, using professionals who know what they're doing and who are willing to do whatever it takes short of sin, right? As long as it's not illegal, we want to help you get into the home. And so if you like the home, if you feel like this is it, most of the time we can find a way to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Not always, unfortunately, but most of the time we can. But sometimes we can just avoid the problems on the front end.
100%.
By knowing what we're looking for. But that should not deter you from pursuing an FHA loan, because it's a really great loan in many situations. So if you want to know more, Joe, how can they get a hold of you to find out?
You give me a call on my direct line. It's 513-907-25. I take pride in never being associated with an 800 number. So
my number is 1-800, no, I'm just joking, 962-7978, or go online to therealestatepastor.com. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.